a continental divide, and now we're in the watershed of the river we're sitting next to now at DeSoto Falls. These headwaters from that Chattahoochee will eventually make their way down to the Gulf of Mexico to meet up with the other waters that we just saw, which I think is fascinating to think of Georgia's waters in the Gulf of Mexico. And you know, the action that streams have in the mountains is just so wonderful. It's so dynamic. It's so powerful. It's so engaging. You know, not only visually for me as an artist. And by the way, these are all oil paintings that I've done. Some of them large, some of them small. But they're captivating scenes and places that we all love and know, where all this energy is being expounded on the landscape. And I mean, you can see in the sort of foreground of this image, this big dark area there, that's a gigantic pothole that this little creek has been running through, wearing away this intensely hard metamorphic rock of the Appalachian Mountains. And here now we're in the headwaters of the Savannah River, my hometown, my original hometown watershed. And fascinating for me to think of how that river that flows by Augusta connects all the way up to the mountains and down to Savannah. I mean, as a kid, those were thoughts that were always foremost in my mind. So here it is, the headwaters of Savannah, working its way, working on the mountain landscape, eroding it, carrying it down to the Piedmont, where unfortunately we can't follow the Savannah River anymore because it's long been buried beneath 3 massive reservoirs built by the Corps of Engineers, as you all know. Fortunately, there is a place that it can still be experienced, and that would be Anthony Shoals on the Broad River, one of my favorite places by far. Again, with growing up in Augusta and always wanting to know my river and having a real interest in nature and history, I was always thwarted and disappointed by never being able to touch and realize those landscapes that were buried beneath the reservoirs. So it was an epiphany, really, for me to find Anthony Shoals and to see one of the Savannah River's main tributaries running over a wide swath of bedrock, doing what a wild and free river does. And of course, in this case, on May 25th of 2009, this spectacular display of Shoals spider lilies in full bloom. And you know, it's really a wonder, and it's great fortune that this scene still exists for us to experience today, because this very location was twice slated for one of those Savannah River watershed dams. The Corps of Engineers planned to dam it, but even before that, a hydropower dam was slated to be built there, and I think it was maybe legal troubles that kept it from being built. But what a good thing. What an amazing place to go, and a precious relic. A lot of you have probably been there. So on down, well, before we go on downstream, here's another of the Savannah's tributaries. This one, a place I also always wanted to see, mainly because my grandparents retired in the Clemson area, and the Kiowa River is up there. And William Bartram wrote really beautiful prose about the Kiowa River and the valley that it flowed through, this lucid green plain and the Serpentine River. And I always wanted to see that. So a part of this project on Bartram that I did was to portray the Kiowa River as he saw it in the 1770s. And here you can see it going right through the site where the Kiowa town, the Cherokee town of Kiowa was. And you can see the valley is wide open, and that's because the Cherokee were using it for agriculture. But in this case, it's going into succession because they've abandoned it since their population is in decline. And you can almost hear the sound of those rapids down there. Sadly, are now buried beneath this, and I won't bother dwelling on that. So let's go way downstream to Augusta, to where I grew up, and to a painting that I did almost 20 years ago, which is kind of amazing to me. But so I've been into the rivers for a while, into portraying them, and when I grew up in Augusta, and probably most people in Augusta see the Savannah River downtown, and they don't realize that they're actually looking at a reservoir, since there's yet another dam downstream of Augusta maintaining the pool. here for, well, originally for boat navigation. So this is another example of this is not the Savannah River that I thought it was and never could find. So again, a twisted story, but nevertheless a beautiful scene. But imagine it like in, say, 1890, before those dams were built, and when all that runoff was coming down the stream from all that poor agriculture that happened after the Civil War. And they wrote about the Savannah River being a very sandy bottom stream that in the summer would dry up so shallow that it was maybe only 2 feet deep, and people would just walk across the river rather than taking a bridge. It's hard to imagine that now. Another scene in Augusta, the Savannah River diverted by the Augusta Canal. You know, I was looking at this image earlier and thinking it's sort of interesting and amazing how water diversion projects that were done before the era of electricity, when we go and visit those places now, they also seem to be fairly beautiful and compelling places. And then all the projects that were done after that, which basically were for generating electricity or flood control, they often seem to be very sterile and sad landscapes. Just an observation. So let's move back up in the Piedmont over to my current home watershed of the Oconee River. Here's Cedar Creek, working on those rock formations around Athens, wearing down the Piedmont. And another beautiful stream, the Oconee National Forest, Sandy Creek. I just love that boulder. You know, it's something between a Pac-Man and a space pod. And I enjoyed standing in that creek and doing that painting. That was a beautiful day. Just below that last boulder, where the stream gradient changes and it levels out, are these beautiful meadows and swamps created by beaver activity. And it's really interesting to me to think that in the pre-settlement landscape, particularly well before settlement, before Charleston was established, before Europeans started trading for beaver pelts, that beavers were widespread throughout the southeast, and even almost every stream in the Piedmont would have had beaver impoundments all up and down it. That this environment was in fact a common pre-settlement environment. One that very much disappeared as soon as the beaver's hides became valuable, and has only really reappeared recently. The North Oconee, working hard to move all that sediment that we put in it down to the coastal plain, and let's just follow it all the way down to the coastal plain, all the way down to the beautiful Altamaha. Let me just read you a little exaltation from William Bartram, since some of you might be going on out of Georgia come this summer down here. How gently flow thy peaceful floods, O Altamaha! How sublimely rise to view on thy elevated shores yon magnolia groves, from whose tops the surrounding expanse is perfumed by clouds of incense, blended with the exhaling balm of the liquid amber, and the odors continually arising from the circumambient aromatic groves of the Lycium, Myrica, Laurus, and Bignonia. I really would love to be there with Bartram in that beautiful smelling spring setting. And this really is what it would have looked like when he was there in that little cypress canoe that he borrowed to go up the Altamaha. Hopefully it won't rain too much when you guys do it. The Altamaha makes its way to the ocean. Here's a little field painting from the very northern tip of Little St. Simon's Island, where we see the sediment that I've been talking about being deposited on the shores of the Atlantic. And I'll end with this slide, because here we get, with our feet planted in the sand in the foreground. I hope you can see all this, by the way. That sandy foreground. Sand's brought down from the Piedmont and the mountains by the Altamaha it's not just the last few hundred years, but over the last millions of years, and really reflecting in this very dynamic environment, the ever-changing landscape of Georgia's rivers, and how beautiful and compelling they are, in my view, because of how dynamic they are. So I don't know if I've made it 15 minutes yet, but
We've got 3 minutes.
hey, I could keep going. No, I hope you all enjoy that, and I hope you all have the experience to get out and see these places as beautiful landscapes in the way I do. Thanks a lot.